right, you ready? All right. Welcome back to 3-year-olds. I don't know what to do with my hands. Welcome back to episode 4 of the Loggerhead Golf Podcast. We're going to hop into a weekend roundup in case you missed anything golf over the weekend. So I guess kind of the biggest one that probably everybody saw was Tiger surgery or another surgery.
A big article in the news this week.
Big news coming out of the Tiger camp. Of course, there wasn't much information in that announcement he put out, but Tiger did undergo another surgery, and looks like major season for 2023 is done.
Yeah, I was going to say it obviously wasn't much of a surprise.
No.
Disappointing for sure. Would like to see Tiger play in the other majors, but I'm sure he'll be back when he can. He'll still be playing.
When do we expect to see the U.S. Open withdrawal, do you guys think?
U.S. Open withdrawal?
Yeah. He hasn't decommitted yet. He's still on the list as of this morning.
I think that's pretty much for sure.
Oh well, yeah. I think what he's going to do is essentially once he gets through the first couple weeks or month or so of recovery, he's probably going to put out another statement saying that he's going to pack it in for the remainder of the year. I wouldn't be surprised. The first tournament we see him back is the PNC, the father-son.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to say,
you can kind of meander that one.
We can ride a cart.
Normally it would probably be the Masters, but it'll probably be the PNC since he's been playing in that with Charlie.
And just a quick note on the U.S. Open. Obviously, tomorrow for our section, we have qualifying at River Landing. So we want to wish Nicky good luck as he tries to qualify. So everybody playing tomorrow, good luck, and prepare for one of the longer days in golf.
It's only 18 holes now.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well,
no longer 36 in one day.
Perfect.
But if you get through locals into sectionals, that's the 36 in one day. So tomorrow's essentially a shootout. We'll hit some shots and see what happens.
Yeah, hope for good weather for you.
Absolutely. One of the kind of more interesting stories, as we've hit on in the past few weeks, has been slow play. And I found it very interesting this weekend. One of the bigger announcements coming from LPGA Tour was Lucy Lee was fined an undisclosed amount of money for slow play. So it seems like one out of the 4 tours are actually doing something about this issue. And it's kind of interesting that it's the LPGA Tour.
Well, the LPGA Tour's had a record for enforcing their pace of play rules. I mean, this isn't the first time they fined or penalized a player for that. And I think that's what comes back to what we've said in weeks past about how PGA Tour, if they're not going to enforce their pace of play rules, just forget them. Mm-hmm. Why even worry about it?
Well, it's kind of like the playoff this weekend for the senior tour over 6 hours for a round of golf.
Yeah, and that's the thing. We alluded on it on the other podcast, other episode, that the longer the rounds are, the more TV viewership there is. It's only going to be beneficial the tour.
If any tour should be able to play fast, it should be the Champions Tour. I mean, they're all riding in golf carts.
And no one's watching. Sorry.
Right.
No, we still definitely watch a few of their events. But the LPGA has always, at times we've seen in the Lexi controversies, they've always been on the forefront of assessing that penalty, right? Maybe sometimes a little too brutal with it. And then we have the PGA Tour on the other hand that doesn't enforce penalties at all.
I mean, they are afraid to penalize a player.
Yeah. And the thing is too, if you do a deeper dive in a lot of these LPGA players, they're not playing for a lot of money. So for them to get fined just speaks the LPGA Tour isn't messing around.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, the PGA Tour has more money to know what to do with. The players have more money to know what to do with. Just find your players.
So let's be clear: the LPGA Tour is still playing for a lot of money.
Oh,
it's
yes.
just not anywhere near as
Anywhere
much as
near.
PGA Tour.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think that's something that if we want to see progress in golf, I think it'd be kind of honorary for the PGA Tour to kind of take some cliff notes from LPGA in order to address this issue.
Yeah, and the nice thing about this past week with the PGA Tour being at the Zurich Classic and it being a 2-man team event, players are a little more relaxed. So, the player interviews were interesting this week because they immediately asked Patrick Cantlay, and Patrick Cantlay says, the PGA Tour already told us they're not going to enforce pace of play. I'm going to play as slow as I want. Yeah. I don't care. Which you can't, even though we as viewers, because I was the first to say watching the Masters was brutal with how slow it is, you can't blame them.
Right, that's what I get at. I mean, if the PGA Tour has said they're not going to enforce the rule doesn't really exist, why does it matter? It's just one of those things where a reporter or someone has picked up on this person's slow and it gives them something to talk about.
Yeah, so, I mean, unless it becomes like something that pops up in an actual tournament, can we officially say that pace of play on the mid side of the game is dead?
For the PGA Tour.
For the PGA Tour. Okay.
Well, I think one of the, while we're on the weird rules is coming out of funky rules is look what happened to the guys at Korn Ferry this week. Taking the shuttle over after they've been shuttled from the practice range to the tee box. That was allowed. And then obviously a few players took a shuttle to get back over, and they were penalized, and a few of them missed the cut, and 2 of them lost their card because of it.
Well, they got penalized taking a shuttle from they started their rounds on the 10th tee, so their turn was from 18 green back to number 1 tee, and apparently it was a long trip. Now, it's not all that uncommon in those types of events to have a shuttle available for those situations. So I think the tournament committee for that one needs to take a little bit of the ownership of that. Did the players violate a rule and deserve the penalty? Absolutely. I mean, they did not read it was on their local rule sheet. They broke the rule. Penalty was assessed. All that's fine. But I think the committee needs to take a little ownership there because in the interview with the players that were penalized, they even mentioned that we walked off the green. There was a shuttle there waiting for us. He asked us to jump in. We just assumed it was to shuttle us to the first tee. We went with it. It'd be very easy to get confused in that situation.
Well, I think the confusing part, too, is they allowed them to shuttle from one place of the golf course to tee off.
Correct.
But then that's where it stopped.
Yeah, and I was going to say, was it from 18 to 1 or was it from 9 to 10?
I think it was from the driving range to get to.
What I read,
It had to be during the round for it to be a penalty, so it doesn't matter where exactly it was, but where one of the players said it was confusing is the sign on the cart said volunteer shuttle.
Correct.
Okay.
It made it almost look official.
And that's the thing. The tournament made it look official.
Right.
Like that's the tournament putting it on, which, it cost one guy his card.
Yeah.
In the reshuffle. So his season's essentially done. He's back to the. I'm sure he's going to get sponsors exemptions.
Oh yeah, he'll
Boo
still get some
Weekley,
starts.
who made the cut, who then got penalized the next day,
Missed a cut.
missed the cut.
Yeah.
You know?
It's just.
That goes into all of this, and I think we've talked a lot about rulings and pace of play and what's going on. And it's like the PGA Tour is caring about, or any of the major tours are caring about the wrong stuff because they keep messing up this little stuff that hurts the overall look of the game.
This one reminds me a lot. Obviously, it's a very much different situation, very different as far as spotlight on it. But Dustin Johnson at Whistling Straits,
Yeah.
on the 72nd hole, is this a bunker? Is it not a bunker? Kind of thing. It feels very much like that. Is this a cart I can ride in or not?
Yeah, and it bodes to the point too. It's like why do you still make players with all the technology we have now with Shot Tracker and you can go on their apps and see every score for every hole? Why are they still making players sign their cards? Because if they sign the wrong score, they're disqualified, even though the tournament is keeping up with the score and posting it and stuff. It goes into like all these little rules and stuff that players have to do that, we can do without, right? Because it just always seems like little petty stuff is costing players essentially their livelihoods.
Now, as far as keeping a scorecard, I wouldn't want to change that.
There's really no need for it now, though.
I think there is. It is playing a tournament round of golf, especially in like some of our Carolinas PGA events where we don't actually keep scorecards.
Well,
I understand
that's
it's different,
different.
but it's at the same time, it's the same thing. I hate playing around a tournament golf where I don't have a scorecard. I don't feel like I'm playing tournament golf anymore.
True. It's just one of those things, though. It's like you're using all this technology in the world to broadcast a tournament.
Yeah, great. And like in our situation, I think it's great to give us the ability to kind of see live scoring. But at the end of the day, I want to have a scorecard. I want it to feel like an official tournament.
Yeah. So it makes sense. But I think, that's just unfortunate thing to happen at the Korn Ferry event, which was a shootout this weekend.
Right.
Holy cow.
Yeah,
Those players are good.
It's if you didn't catch it, guy shot 59-67. So if you shot 5 under for 2 days, we actually had one of our local clients and good friends of us qualify into the tournament. Shot 5 under for 2 days, went home.
It's good playing. I mean, shot 64 to
Get in
the Monday qualifier.
Yeah. golf is hard.
It's a hard sport.
And golf is deep.
Imagine that 64, 68, 69, you go home. No
That's like-
money. You spend all the money to get out there, spend all the money, hotels, cars, food, plus the qualifiers cost. And then you
You
go
don't
home.
make money in those qualifiers either.
Nope.
Yeah, it's a tough game, but it only, it's also a testament to the players that make it. That all it takes is 1 week. 1 week for something to click, and it can set up the rest of your year. But
And do you guys want to stress on the importance of why this specific week on Korn Ferry was so important? That reshuffle
yeah,
is?
so and for the player that we're saying it cost him his season. So the Korn Ferry Tour does a reshuffle after so many events to start the season that repairs the field and gives each player, you're earning new status, right? So the players that rate on the bubble, this was their 1 week to make or break. And that 2-shot penalty cost a player his break because he was in. And then that 2-shot penalty missed the cut. He no longer gets in the reshuffle.
So it establishes your status on the field for the rest of the year.
Yeah. And, so it's, golf is a deep game, and it just gets tougher and tougher every day. Now, I think one event, the Zurich Classic's always fun seeing the team event. I'm going to go out and say it. I'm a LIV guy on this podcast, so that LIV event was awesome.
Yeah, especially since, they really haven't had an event in Australia in, 2 years, 3 years?
Well,
Or any golf major event.
Yeah, I was going to say the best players in the world haven't played golf in Australia in a long time. Now, Cam Smith, Jason Day, a lot of the Australian golfers still go over to play in the Aussie Open, the Aussie PGA, because typically it's at awesome golf courses. But that was also a big part as to why a lot of the players went to LIV that did. Right, like Cam Smith is because the PGA Tour left Australia. They essentially stopped doing anything with Australian tournaments. So, it was, if anything, this weekend proved that there was this void in Australia.
I say Australia is definitely ripe for
Golf.
big golf events.
Yeah, big golf events. And Taylor Gooch couldn't even get to his final putt, 18 green. It was absolutely nuts. Now the tournament was crazy. They made their own party hole. They had a bunch of celebrities there for it, and you could tell they put a lot of resources into this one tournament to make it what it is. And I think that's somewhat a success for the new golf league. Obviously they're not going to be able to do that every week, but to have a hole-in-one on their party hole, Chase Koepka making that hole-in-one, place going absolutely nuts. Already when that tournament, being that it's a shotgun, music's playing throughout the tournament, it's already a party at every event. Right. It just looks like they took it up a second notch.
Especially with one comedian making a pretty funny scene.
Oh, yeah. But also for Taylor Gooch to shoot 61-61 to start the tournament. He was 20 under par after 2 rounds. How crazy is that?
How many rounds did they play?
3.
Okay. I say it sounds like they had obviously a very successful event this week, but I just find it difficult to watch the LIV, and I don't know if it's because of where it's broadcast at or what.
Supposedly it's on CW, but you can't ever see it.
I haven't found it. I haven't really been able to watch it, and then when I have, I find the shotgun starts to be a little bit distracting, a little bit harder to follow for me, and that just might be me being more of a traditionalist. Now, I'm not saying that I'm a huge proponent of the PGA Tour and what they do. I don't really care who does it. I'd like to see a broadcast where when the broadcast comes on, I don't have to wait for 30 minutes before I see a golf shot.
I do not want to listen to anybody talk about what the players are going to face that day when there's already players on the golf course.
Correct.
Just show us.
Yeah, just show us the golf. Show us, don't tell us.
And I would say, in watching the LIV events, that's one thing they do right, because when you turn it on and they broadcast it, because they do a 3-2-1, and then the broadcast comes on, they'll have their reporters on the range while the players are warming up. Then it feels like it goes straight to the golf course. Right. Now, the team event's interesting, but where I think they need to essentially take it, because this weekend, on the second to last hole, Pat Perez is in the final group. There's multiple teams within a couple shots. I think his his team only had a 1 shot lead with 2 holes to play, and he drains a 40-footer on that party hole, and the place erupts. But like he cared because that 40-footer gave him a 2 shot lead, which led to the 4 aces winning the tournament. Which it's like they have something there. It is kind of tough to watch, but the only reason why I watch golf is because I want to see golf shots.
Right.
It's not one specific player. Just show golf.
Yeah. That's my big knock on the PGA Tour is their broadcasts are generally you get a sports report, a weather report, commercials, and then you see some putting.
Yeah.
That's about all the golf you see.
Yeah.
You watch a PGA
You see
Tour
the leader
broadcast.
missing putts or whoever's making putts.
Yeah.
I think that goes into majors too. I feel like Masters, if it wasn't for like the Masters app, most people probably wouldn't even know what happens in the morning because you've got the biggest, basically our Super Bowl kicking off the season, but you can't watch until 3 p.m. coverage.
That's just always been tradition.
Correct. But I think that's what needs to change in order to keep this momentum going is there's people that go to work in the afternoon. So let's broadcast some of that live golf, some of that good golf in the morning because some of your best scores we never see a shot from except your highlights, right? Where if you have the capability, which I know with like ESPN Plus and subscriptions, you can watch some, but as far as major championships, especially with the U.S. Open coming up, U.S. Open broadcast has always been traditionally horrible. And I feel like that's one thing that does need to change is hitting on your point is we're trying to watch golf to watch golf.
Yeah. But that's also why, even though it's weird, that's why LIV has shotgun events.
Right.
They're essentially saying, you're going to see all of our golfers on the golf course at one time.
Yeah.
Now, do I think there needs to be more players? Absolutely. Like 48 just doesn't feel like enough players. And I think if they were going to piggyback off of this weekend and what they did well, they need to essentially extend the field, right? And make more players involved, more names, so the golf fan can see golf shots, right?
Right.
And that's where they're missing right now because every other, PGA Tour, USGA, PGA of America, they're doing all this stuff that's subscription based because they just want you to spend more money to watch what they already have access to broadcast.
And what they already should be showing you.
What they
too.
are, yeah. And that's what it turns down to. That's everything. That's every sport.
Yeah, Sunday ticket NFL is no different.
Heck yeah, I can get it on YouTube TV. Whoop, whoop. I'm sorry.
I think one opportunity that they have that they've hit on too is do some co-events, men's and women's, especially if, the hype's true about Greg Norman having all these talk with LPGA players. Obviously, I'm sure if that announcement ever gets made due to Saudis, there'll be some controversy behind it.
For what?
Ladies tour with
Oh,
LIV.
yeah, he
like
did
the
say
ladies
that
tour.
in an interview this week.
I feel like a huge opportunity is to have your top ranked LIV guy with your top ranked quote unquote for all points of this conversation LIV girl and do some mixed events.
Right. It would definitely be interesting.
Because
Sure.
I think the tour does it once a year and it's one of the highest watched events of the PGA Tour. So who knows? We'll see where that leads us. I think that's one, again, just if we're tossing out ideas how to grow golf viewership, I think that could be something that needs to be explored.
Yeah, and even though the LPGA did have a major going on this weekend, and
Which one of the 9?
it's replacing the ANA Inspiration that was previously at Mission Hills. The Chevron Championship, Lilia Vu, who won, first time major winner. The last few years she was on the Epson Tour, and then essentially caught fire, playing really well. But the PGA Tour, they do fun events. So like they had and what I'm alluding to is the PGA Tour has this team event, the Zurich Classic, which in the previous years, how often have you guys watched the Zurich Classic?
Before it's a team event, not much.
Or even as a team event. It's been a team event for essentially like the last 5 years.
I was going to say it's been a few years. I actually think it's more interesting to watch with the team event.
Well, it's just like they have a perfect opportunity to, why don't they make that the co-ed event between the two tours?
They could.
I believe Lexi's
That's like
played
Lexi's
in it
played
once
in
or
it before,
twice.
yeah.
Yeah. And that's the thing. They've had players trickle in,
Yeah.
but Nelly Korda played in it last year with Tony Finau, right?
That might be what I'm thinking.
Yeah. And but that's a perfect example of giving the viewership something different, because the team event's fun. And I watched this weekend, and we had first-time PGA Tour winners that are now going to have exemptions for 2 years and to get in some tournaments. These do not get them in the majors.
Right.
Nick Hardy and Davis Riley, which 2 young guys that are really good golfers, but they don't. Tournament doesn't really do anything for me. Like, it's blah.
Yeah.
You know, and I know it's probably more of a break for the players, but
I think it's more of like kind of a mental mix-up, right? It's their one time. They have walk-in music. Obviously, Scottsdale's its own thing, but it kind of brings a interesting aspect to golf to where, yes, it still is a tour event. There's still that pressure, but you've just got a different aspect stepping into it. And I think that's why everybody loves Ryder Cup so much.
It's definitely a little more relaxed atmosphere.
So,
Yeah.
But
well, perfect. Well, obviously, we're coming into springtime. Our weather here is starting to be beautiful to where we can sneak out after work, walk 9.
unless if Nicky's playing golf.
Yeah, that too.
all right, black clouds. What we're gonna have to call you from now
Yeah.
on.
Yeah. So one thing that spring comes is spring cleaning, right? And how do we apply that to our golf bags and our golf games? You know, I think that's one thing that doesn't get talked about a lot is coming into, off the winter in certain parts of the states. They don't have any golf for the entire winter. They may have indoor simulator leagues, but for the most part, this is their first opportunity in 3 to 5 months to actually get out on the course. What's some things that, for our topic of spring cleaning in the golf world, that they can kind of dig into to get ready?
Well, let's start out with Nicky. What have you been doing in your bag here last week? Have you been messing around with some new stuff in your bag?
Yeah, I've been added new wedges to the bag, so fresh grooves. I've noticed, especially with my lob wedge, that I'm not seeing the ball react on the green the way I like. So I know something's off. So I immediately know it's like, hey, let's put some fresh grooves in the bag. And then from there, a gap fitting. I've essentially did a yardage and gap fitting throughout my bag to make sure that I have every single shot and number that I need set for.
I think we have an example of it.
Yeah, we're going to pull it up here for those watching.
Yeah. So, and obviously, there was, I went through my entire bag. I've noticed playing the last few weeks. Now, coming out of winter, I haven't played a lot of golf just because, time of year, weather, things like
now,
that.
if you're OCD, don't pay attention to the order of the golf clubs.
Yeah.
Because they make no
Foresight
sense.
Reports is not the most organized. But the nice thing is I've realized I was missing that 235 club, right? So in getting new wedges, I took a wedge. I took my 51 degree out of the bag and I added my hybrid back in, my 20 degree hybrid, because I have a 2-iron in the bag. That thing's a rocket ship.
I was going to say, actually, I think it'd be interesting if you explain those gaps in the top end of your bag.
Yeah.
How they work.
What I was playing before the new wedges, I was playing in the top of the bag driver, 16.5 degree 4 wood, essentially 4 wood, 2-iron, 17 degree 2-iron. And then I would go straight to my 4-iron, which my 4-iron's 24 degrees.
Right.
I play weaker lofts. So I put the 2-iron in the bag because I had a hybrid in previously and I don't like hitting hybrid off the tee box. My 4 wood flies about 265. So I needed that 240, 250 club that I can hit off a tee box. So I put a 2-iron in and it does just that. I fly it 245 and it maybe gets 60, 70 feet in the air.
Yeah.
So
It's a bullet.
it's not holding a green. So what I did from there is essentially realize my 4-iron, it's probably on the other page here, but we'll see, my 4-iron was maxing out right about 210. And this is, and in doing this, and for the normal golfer, I'm not swinging all out. These are what I call golf course swings. And what I tell my students when we work in lessons and working through the bags, we have golf course swings. So, that's essentially 80% stock shot. I'm trying to make sure I get my yardage down and my dispersion down. So 4-iron carry, and I'm only looking at carry number here, 210. That's all I want out of my 4-iron for a stock shot. The nice thing is if I had a 220 shot, it's still a 4-iron. So I wasn't worried about that. But I essentially didn't have a 235 club in my bag. Now, I had 14 clubs in previously, so I had nothing to do. My pitch and wedge is weak enough. I can back my pitch and wedge down. So I was like, hey, let's take the 51 out, add the 54. So then I could put a 3 hybrid back in. And I believe it's on the other page. But essentially the 3 hybrid, you'll see, I think it's flying right at 229. So I realized playing on the golf course, I had a gap.
228.6. You
228.
got to find another 0.4 of a yard.
And I was going to say, and how offline was that? That's one thing I was amazed about with these. But I knew I was second guessing myself. I knew there was a little bit of gap, right? So instead of saying, it is what it is and playing with it, I immediately made a change.
Right.
And that's something that every single golfer can take away kind of from what I did with my bag. Now, obviously leading into a qualifier where it's essentially 18 holes for a shootout, I needed to make sure
You had your bases covered.
I had my bases covered.
You had those,
so.
those. Plus, let's face it, you're going to potentially see those yardages on some of the holes at River Landing.
Oh, and
that 230 shot on the par fives there could be pretty critical.
Yeah, I mostly always see, like, for me, the top end of my bag's way more important than the bottom end.
Right.
Because based off of lie, conditions, things like that, I could easily chip a 9-iron 125 if I wanted to, if I feel more comfortable with that shot. So I'm not worried about my wedges or any of those numbers being absolutes.
Right.
But the top end of the bag has to be perfectly. And I had a big gap. I had essentially a 25-yard gap.
Let's face it, it's harder to hit a 3/4 2-iron or a 3/4 3-wood. It's hard to play and hit different yardages with long clubs. That's why they're long clubs.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're made to go far.
Yeah.
So essentially, to kind of sum it up, what you did, you worked on by starting out with wedges and identifying some changes you wanted to make there in wedges. That allowed you to remove a club from the bag,
Mm-hmm.
which opened up the possibilities to fill a gap that we had in the top end of the bag with something else.
Mm-hmm.
And then, ironically enough, that was to go 2-iron hybrid and then 4-iron,
Yeah.
which I think most golfers would probably assume that you would go hybrid and then into your irons.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have that transition that.
Exactly that, because it's a lot of people would think it's like, oh, why don't you just have a 2-iron and a 2 hybrid, 3 hybrid, 4-iron?
Right.
And excuse me,
They serve different purposes.
my biggest thing is I don't care so much about head shape, head loft, or any of that.
Right.
Or sorry, I only care about the loft of the clubs.
But if you think about it from a ball flight perspective,
Mm-hmm.
it made sense. The 2-iron is more of a distance club. It's a second option off the tee.
Hybrid
You wanted a little lower ball flight with that, more trajectory control. And then
Mm-hmm.
the hybrid is a golf club you're most likely going to be using for approach shots and going for par fives and 2.
I will
long
never
stuff
hit
like
that off a tee on a par 4.
Right, so it's made to get in the air a little bit
It's made to
higher
get in
and
the
stop
air.
the ball a little quicker. So while it seems kind of funny, it makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the fun part is to, with club fitting, especially doing gap sessions, is there are ways to talk and discuss about your bag and your game and how they work together.
Well, I think that's the uniqueness of us offering this gap fitting service. That Foresight Princess report gives you your carry numbers, but it helps you with the fitting aspect as well. As you have a 5-wood, which is 18 degrees, a 2 hybrid, 18 degrees, and a 2-iron, that's 18 degrees. And most people, they don't realize that it can be the same degree, but there's probably in carry distance between those 3 different 18-degree clubs, there's probably a 25-yard carry difference between the 2-iron and the 5-wood.
Right.
Head shape, the ball speed it's coming off of.
They may end up in the same place, but they're getting there in a different way.
Yep. So, and that's where, tuning your bag, like we just discussed with him, is so important. Is I've always kind of been that same token where I have a 2-iron and a hybrid, and sometimes they do stay in the same place because I don't like hybrids traditionally because they hook, right?
Right.
So I feel like that's one thing that's so unique about us doing
But
gap
we've gotten more options in hybrids now and more head shape options in the hybrids.
and
but they
lie
don't-
angles for the
Yeah,
first
right.
time.
They
That's
don't
helped
really-
the most. They don't
Ping
turn
we can
over
go-
as much.
Yeah, exactly.
Ping probably has one of the best adapters in the game, with how flat their
can
standard
go in,
adapter can get,
Yeah.
which is awesome. And I would say the biggest thing too in doing this, and that's the nice thing about kind of some of the services we offer in this gap fitting. I wasn't just looking at yardage. I wanted to see how much my ball is curving on stock shots.
Right.
So we knew no matter what, like a stock shot, my ball I was right around 6 yards of curve from right to left throughout my irons, and it straightened up as I get into the long irons, which I myself, it was comforting to see. And that ties a little more into golf swing. But not only that, it's making sure there's not something in your bag that's completely off.
Right. Or you have 2 clubs doing the exact same thing.
Yeah, how often do we see that?
Every day.
Almost every
day there's a client that has 2 or even 3 clubs.
Right.
They think they need a 3-wood, 5-wood, 7-wood, and then 7-wood flies the other 2 clubs by 10, 15 yards.
Yeah.
Spin loft.
Yeah. But
is there anything you're going to make changes going into your spring tournament season or in golf season?
I kind of got out ahead of mine. I did a little early. I mean, I changed the tire iron set at start of the year. I've been tweaking around with driver and kind of, and Nicky can even talk about that a little bit. Eventually just ending back up into where I've always been. I last year kind of experimented with chasing distance and going all the way maxed out with a 46-inch build, and ultimately decided that was a little too hard to swing consistently, and so we've gone back to a 45-inch build now, and with that, getting back some swing weight in the driver allowed me to slap some lead tape on there and make it very fade biased, so I could hit a shot shape that I trust a little bit easier with that club now.
New 3-wood.
New 3-wood, changed from 4-wood to 3-wood. Yeah, so I decided to go back to a traditionally lofted 3-wood instead of 4-wood. And that was mainly just from, again, a distance perspective. I felt like the 4-wood had a little bit too much of a governor on it. When I was playing golf with the old 3-wood before the 4-wood, it seemed like I always ended up in that yardage gap range on the par 5s where I needed, my 3-wood was going too far. So I was like, well, let's go with a 4-wood. Now I got a 4-wood, I got a 250, 260 3-wood, and 4-wood in my bag now. Now I'm playing from yardage where I want a little bit more, more 3-wood.
Finding that happy medium.
Yeah, had to kind of go back and forth with that. Just nothing huge, making little tweaks. I mean, I say nothing huge. I did a whole new iron set, but ultimately that wasn't a big change.
With a huge shaft change.
It was a big shaft change, but the overall look and profile of the golf clubs are exactly the same. The lofts are the same, so it's nothing of a change. Well, actually, we changed lie angle. And then you think about that, we changed.
Yeah, and
changed line quite a bit.
Yeah, I'd say, we're blessed to have some really awesome technology here at Loggerhead, and with that, we as every single person that comes in our store has access to it. We always have access to it, So we were able to tweak our clubs, right? We can always get better. Any golfer can always get better. We learned, typically the old school thought, Caleb likes to hit draws, I like to hit draws, Kyle hit draws. So what was the old school thought for someone that wants to draw the ball? What do we need to do to the lie angle?
Well, it depends.
But for the most part, what are we going to do to help keep it from overhooking?
Keep it from overhooking, we go flatter with it.
We go flatter with it. So, typically we always play a super flat lie angle. Yeah. Well, now with the technology, we can understand, we can measure what's called dynamic lie, actual lie of the golf club at impact. Right. And then what do we learn with your clubs and your new irons?
Well, what we learned is I like to slam the toe into the ground.
Mm-hmm. So we definitely don't need to go flat, do we?
No.
And that's the biggest thing, and that leads into more gear effect, right? But we moved your lie angles upright.
Yeah, essentially 3 degrees upright from what I was previously playing.
Mm-hmm. Now, old school, we would have been like, oh gosh, that ball's going to start left. What did it do?
It actually starts straighter on line because the club face is more square through the turf.
Yep.
And I don't have to try to fight to drag the toe of the golf club through the ground. It was that was probably the biggest change I've made in a while. And I'll preface that with saying too, while I've always been a traditionalist in my golf bag and the golf clubs that I carry, I've never been afraid to try something different. I'll make a change on a whim just to try something different, get a different feel.
I bet my 7-iron 5 degrees flat.
Right.
Sometimes I'm not playing 5 degrees.
Yeah, sometimes you just got to make a change just
to
help you feel something in your swing or just to see a change in your game. So what are some things that that the average golfer or some of our clients that come in the store, what are some things they can do to get their golf bags golf season ready?
Well, I think one of the biggest things that we're seeing right now is just changing your grips. Because even if you don't play, if you don't play through the winter, especially if you're a wind dry tack client, those grips, even if you're not using them, will deteriorate.
Yeah.
Especially here, we have the salt in the air.
So they've probably dry rotted by
Correct.
now.
Yeah, it breaks down that rubber compound. But most people that we see in our fittings, well, how old are your clubs? About 6, 7 years old. Well, they've still got the stock grips on them. You've never re-gripped them? Oh, no, I didn't think it'd make a difference. So then even if we throw a new grip on the 7-iron, like, wow, it makes it feel like a whole new golf club.
And I think you're being generous there. I've seen some of my fittings come in with 20 to 30-year-old golf clubs still with the stock grip on it.
So
that's
shiny that we can see our reflection.
It's a 20 to 30-year-old grip that person's trying to play golf
Now,
with.
I was going to say, Golf Pride says you need to change your grips every
40 rounds.
40 rounds. How often to the normal golfer? Let's say somebody that plays twice a month.
I say ultimately 40 rounds is unrealistic. But if you're a regular golfer, and I'd consider a regular golfer to play 2 times a month, once a week, that kind of range, you probably need to change your grips once a year.
Yep.
Yeah.
At least.
I would agree.
Now you could do more, and that probably just be better. But once a year, so you start the year off with fresh grips, and by the end of the year, they've gathered enough oils and debris from your hands that it's probably time to change.
That's how you got to kind of think about it almost, as your grips is kind of like an oil change for your car.
Right.
It's preventative maintenance, but it's going to make the overall feel of the golf club just stay consistent.
Right.
Yeah.
So
I'm even though in the fitting portion, choosing the right club, but the grip is the most important thing on your club.
Yeah.
You don't hold the golf club, the club head.
I was like, what are we holding on to with a golf club?
Yeah, and hey, trust me, I'm lazy when it comes to changing my grips. My grips right now are shot. I'm gonna stick with them through tomorrow.
Well, it's just way easier to change your golf clubs.
That's a good. I don't need new clubs.
But also, I was going to say as well too, and we hit on wedges a lot, but always take a look at your wedges. I feel like starting off the season, it may not mean you're buying new wedges, but it may just mean you're going in, making sure that the lie angles are what you need the wedges to be, the loft gapping's correct. If you've played a wedge for 3 or 4 seasons, it might be time to freshen up and update the grooves on at least your most lofted wedge to keep your spin numbers as high as you can maintain them.
Yeah, and we've talked about that.
Yeah, there's a lot you can do in wedges.
Well, especially with the ground being harder or frozen in the winter, it's going to alter those lie angles.
Right.
So it's definitely important with
And
all the
practicing
clubs.
off of mats,
Yeah.
I was going to
outdoors.
say, Colin, can you explain to our listeners a lot of the why does a listener need to be careful with changing their lie angles in their clubs, especially with the modern equipment?
There's a couple things. A lot of people will make assumptions based off of address position. Just because that toe's in the air at address, you're going to have that buddy who's watched a YouTube video and, your club needs to be flatter because the toe's in the air. Well, he hasn't made a golf swing yet. That's not the finished position. It goes back to that data point on GC that we see as lie angle at impact, right? Yeah. Is it may be a degree high in the air at address, but 4 degrees down at impact. So we may need to crank that thing more upright.
Right.
From a bending perspective, a lot of golf clubs now, they're putting this word on the hosel, forged. Sounds great, costs more money, but the only thing forged on the golf club is the face. It's welded to a cast body, so if you try to bend a cast golf club, for those of you who don't know, regardless of what type of bending bar you have, it could actually snap the golf club.
Right.
And that's where you have to be really careful if you take it to a golf shop. Fortunately for us, a lot of people come in here and ask us before doing it. But if you're someone, that's listening outside of the region of the Cape Fear, you need to have your golf shop check to make sure it's a fully forged hosel. That way it's bendable. If not, and they snap it, they're probably going to say, sorry, we tried to bend it. We knew the risk.
Yeah.
And then if they are bendable, like with Mizuno, they're really great. They're out of Atlanta. You could send your clubs there. You're going to be without clubs for probably 2-3 weeks. They'll rebend them, and it's not going to cost very much. Right. But that's a lot safer than taking it to someone who's maybe not as experienced as we are here, and then you end up with a broken 5 and 7 iron.
Yeah, and I'll add to that because that's the biggest thing. Just because a club says it's forged doesn't mean it's forged.
Right.
So that's why it's super important to get fit if you're looking at new irons, because you can go and buy a set of irons off the rack. Go buy a set of 790s. They're a great iron. They say forged on the hosel. You bring them into us, and then you want us to bend them to your spec.
We can't.
We can't. They have. We may be able to get a degree out of it, but those irons have memory.
Yeah,
so
they'll bend right back.
They'll bend right back. And that's a little bit of a marketing scam by the manufacturers. Now, there are some companies that still I mean, every company still makes a fully forged club.
Yeah, for sure.
But you got to watch out for those players' distance irons.
Yeah. That's that kind of middle ground of the iron market.
Which has been the most popular iron the last 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, most of those are in play. And I was going to say the final thing to me, as far as things you can do to get your golf bag ready, like that gap session, like what we did with Nicky, I think it's a very powerful tool. Gives you a way to see, obviously, exactly how far you're hitting each golf club, help you adjust from wintertime yardages to summertime yardages when you're playing golf. Also identify if we need to check line angles on your irons or check the loft gapping on your iron set. And also to make sure that the golf clubs are going the distances you need them to go and you're playing the yardage you want to play. I think those gap fitting sessions like that, where you go in and checking your yardages, are pretty good, powerful tools for the golfer.
And I would say the coach in me, I would want the listeners to know this. My sheet came on there and it said my 7-iron goes 174 yards. I don't always play my 7-iron 174 yards. 2 months ago, my 7-iron was not going 174 yards. So your yardages are always going to change.
Right.
How your body's feeling. I call it golf muscles, right? You have those golf twitch muscles. If you haven't played in a long time, you're going to be a little slower at impact than you probably are in the middle of golf season. So, and that's why it's important that it's not so much that, you need to do a gap session every month.
Right.
But I would at least say if you're serious about the game of golf, or even just serious about wanting to make sure you can control what
as much as what you can control.
Yeah, as much.
Yeah.
I would probably do a couple of those a year.
Yeah,
for sure, just to make sure everything's in line. Because
it's knowing your numbers.
Yeah.
Right. At the end of the day, it comes down to you play better golf when you know how far your clubs go. Because how many times do we see it every day? Customer comes and hits a 7-iron. Well, I thought outside it was going to 140. Well, yeah, it's rolling 27 yards on the ground and ending at 140, but it's not carrying that number.
I'll say if you're hitting irons, do not look at total distance unless your descent angle is terrible. But and I think now I had an awesome session there. Just swing felt good. I hit almost a lot of shots out of the center of the face. So I even look at that first gap session as a baseline, right? So I know if numbers start to get a little squirrely, it's either my golf swing or my golf clubs, because now I have a really solid baseline.
You understand where your starting point is.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. And that's also the nice thing is everything can be individualized to the player.
Correct. It's customized to you.
Yeah.
It's kind of ambiguous, right? There's no set, this is what we're going to do. We're going to find out.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would say to summarize, best way to kind of get your golf season figured out is, look at your grips, see if your grips need to get done.
Correct.
Find out a way, to hit some balls on any type of launch monitor to understand. Now, obviously, if you're local here near us, we'd be always happy to help. But find your closest launch monitor, see where your numbers are, see if there's a net gapping issue, and then go see a fitter. Come see us and say, hey,
this is what I need to work on.
This is what's going on. Right. Especially even if you're not, send your questions in to us. Right. We're always happy to help. And this is all something that, you technically don't have to do in a hitting session. If you're like, hey, something's off in this number, typically we can, just over a simple phone call or message,
right.
we can help out.
Yeah. So if you guys have any questions about spring cleaning your golf game, instructional questions or club questions, feel free to shoot us a message. You can call us, DM us on Instagram, comment on YouTube. And kind of going into the clubs, really exciting announcement. We are going to start filming this week. Loggerhead is going to start doing full club reviews on YouTube. So really excited to give a unbiased opinion about all the new equipment. You will see a lot of data points from GC Quad, ball speed, and then we're going to take a deep dive into the actual technology of the club. So really excited to give a brand agnostic review. Because as we've seen and why we wanted to start this, there's a lot of misinformation about there because it's who's paying me the most to say that it's a good golf club.
Yeah. It should be fun.
Yeah,
really excited.
Look forward to it.
Well, thanks for listening. If you haven't already, subscribe on YouTube, turn on push bell notifications, and we'll see you next week.